They accused the human of kidnapping alien royalty. What they found shocked everyone. The war had been raging for what seemed like an eternity, tearing apart civilizations and shattering any hope of peace. Ethan Blake was just one of the countless soldiers who fought in the endless battle between humanity and the alien forces that threatened to wipe them out. He was an ordinary soldier, not a hero or a legend, just a man doing his job. But in the end, it seemed as if that wasn't enough. Ethan found himself on the front lines of a bitter war against an alien species known as the Xylarans. Led by their ruthless queen, Xylaria, the Xylarans had swept through countless systems, leaving devastation in their wake. To most of the human forces, Xylaria was more than just a queen. She was a symbol of destruction, a force of nature who could not be stopped. For years, humanity had been struggling to contain her forces, but with each battle it felt as though they were losing ground. The human resistance had been pushed back further and further into the galaxy, and with each day it seemed that the end was inevitable. The Xylarans had the upper hand, superior technology, numbers, and strategy. Humanity had nothing but their grit and determination. But even that wasn't enough. Ethan's battalion had been part of a last-ditch effort to hold a strategic planet on the edge of a crucial sector. The mission was simple: stop the Xylarans from gaining control of the planet's resources. If they succeeded, it could delay the war for a few more years, years that humanity desperately needed. But things didn't go as planned. They had been ambushed. The moment they touched down on the planet's surface, it became clear that they had walked right into a trap. Ethan and his squad fought fiercely, but the Xylaran forces were overwhelming. The planet's surface turned into a battlefield of blood, fire, and smoke. Soldiers on both sides fell. Ethan's comrades were cut down around him as they made their last stand. But even though he fought with everything he had, he was ultimately captured. The Xylarans weren't interested in killing him immediately. No, they had other plans. Xylaria, the queen herself, wanted him alive. Why, he didn't know. But as Ethan was dragged across the battlefield, bound and bloody, he caught a glimpse of her ship in the distance, hovering above the chaos. The sight of the massive vessel, its dark silhouette outlined against the burning skies, sent a chill down his spine. Xylaria's warship was like no other. It was alive, an organic behemoth grown from the same dark alien matter that composed her people. It looked less like a ship and more like a predator preparing to strike. Within hours, Ethan found himself aboard that very ship, locked in a cold, dark cell. The metal walls felt as though they were closing in around him, the air thick and stifling. His arms were bound, his head spinning from the blows he had taken during the capture. He could hear the distant sounds of alien voices and the hum of the ship's engines, but the darkness of his cell made everything feel distant, like he was in a nightmare he couldn't escape. The guards who had brought him there didn't speak to him. They simply shoved him into the cell and left. His mind raced, but nothing made sense. Xylaria, the queen, had spared him. Why? Why take a simple soldier when there were far more important people she could capture? Was it some form of torture? Or did she want to make an example out of him? As hours stretched into days, Ethan's fear began to give way to confusion. His mind kept replaying the moment when he had been captured. The Xylaran soldiers had shown no mercy. They were merciless machines driven by the will of their queen. Yet, despite all that, they had chosen to keep him alive. It wasn't just his survival that bothered him. It was the fact that Xylaria herself had ordered it. Days blurred together. The ship was a cold, unforgiving place. Ethan's meals were sparse, and his water was barely enough to keep him alive. But it wasn't the hunger or thirst that plagued him. It was the uncertainty. He had no idea what was happening outside the ship, what the fate of his people was, or if humanity would survive the war. For all he knew, the entire human race could be losing ground, slipping into oblivion while he sat here in this dark cell, a prisoner of war with no real understanding of why. Then, one day, the door to his cell opened. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. A tall figure stepped into the doorway, casting a long shadow across the floor. It was a Xylaran officer, one of the creatures who had captured him. She was carrying a tray of food, but it was not the usual gruel. It was something better, something that looked almost human. Her eyes met his for a brief moment before she spoke in her alien tongue. Ethan had no idea what she said, but the tone was unmistakable. She wasn't here to hurt him, at least not right now. The officer set the tray down in front of him, then backed away, still watching him with a curious expression. Ethan hesitated for a moment before reaching for the food. He was starving, but something about this moment felt wrong. The Xylarans had no reason to show him any kindness, and yet here he was, being treated like a guest in the enemy's stronghold. As he ate, his mind raced. Was it some kind of trick? Was this just part of the Queen's plan to break him, to wear him down psychologically? Ethan's eyes darted around the room, looking for any signs of danger. But there were no hidden weapons, no traps. The food was real, the water fresh. It was more than he had expected. Later that day, the door opened again, but this time it wasn't the officer. It was someone far more significant, someone Ethan had never imagined he would ever meet in person. The figure that entered the room was tall, imposing, and unlike any alien he had seen before. Zalaria stood before him, the Queen herself. She was a towering presence, dressed in dark armor that seemed to pulse with an eerie, almost organic energy. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, her skin a shimmering, iridescent black that seemed to shift with every movement she made. Her features were sharp, her posture regal. This was not just a leader, this was a creature of power. For a moment, Ethan felt the weight of her presence crush him. The Queen's gaze locked onto his, and he could feel her analyzing him, studying him as though he were nothing more than an insect under a microscope. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his palms sweaty. "Human," Zalaria spoke, her voice a low, resonating tone that sent shivers down his spine. "You are not here by accident. I have spared your life for a reason." Ethan didn't speak. What could he say? The Queen had spared him, but for what purpose? He waited for her to continue, every nerve in his body on high alert. "I have seen the strength of your people," she continued. "I have witnessed your resilience. That is why you are here, prisoner. You are here to understand what is at stake." Ethan's heart raced. He didn't know what she meant, but the way she spoke suggested that this was not going to end the way he expected. In the presence of Zalaria, the very Queen who had brought untold destruction to his people, Ethan realized that his life was no longer in his own hands. He was a prisoner, not just of the Xylarans, but of the truth that had yet to be revealed. But whatever Zalaria had planned for him, whatever fate she intended to hand him, Ethan could not help but wonder, why had she spared him? What was it that made him different from the countless other soldiers who had fallen before her? Was there more to this than met the eye? As the Queen turned and left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts, the uncertainty of his future began to weigh heavily on him. Whatever Zalaria had in mind, he knew one thing for sure: his life was no longer his own. It was tied to something far bigger than he could have ever imagined, something that in time would break him. And that was only the beginning. The days blurred into one another. Ethan had no sense of time anymore. Every moment seemed like a repeat of the last. He was stuck in his small, cold cell aboard Zalaria's warship, a prisoner of an alien queen. Yet, unlike other captives he had heard about from the soldiers, he wasn't treated like dirt. The guards didn't beat him, didn't threaten him with death. Instead, they kept him alive, watched him closely, but allowed him a sort of strange comfort. The food was basic but nourishing, the water always fresh. It wasn't luxury, but it wasn't cruel either. What was Zalaria planning? The Queen had spared him for a reason. He was certain of it now, but what that reason was, he couldn't understand. The more time he spent alone with his thoughts, the more it confused him. There had to be some deeper meaning to it all. Why keep him alive when she could have easily killed him like all the others? Was he a pawn? A tool for something bigger? Or perhaps, as Zalaria had said, there was something about his people that fascinated her. The days that followed his first meeting with the Queen were filled with silence and confusion. But then, one morning, something changed. The door to his cell opened again, but it wasn't a guard who entered this time. It was the Queen herself. Zalaria stood tall in the doorway, her dark armor gleaming in the low light of the cell. Her presence filled the room like a storm. Her eyes, glowing faintly, fixed on Ethan as she stepped inside. Ethan stood, unsure of what to do. Should he bow? Should he say something? But Zalaria didn't give him the chance. Her gaze locked onto his, and for a moment there was no sound in the world except the pounding of Ethan's heart. "I see you've been thinking," she said in her smooth, resonant voice, "and I can see the question on your mind." Ethan swallowed, trying to steady his breath. He had so many questions, but what good would asking them do? He was a prisoner, a nobody, compared to the Queen standing before him. "Why have you spared me?" he finally asked, his voice rough from disuse. He had to know. He couldn't go on living in this cell, stuck in limbo without answers. Zalaria regarded him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, with a small movement of her hand, she gestured for him to follow. Without waiting for him to respond, she turned and walked out of the cell, the sound of her footsteps echoing down the metal hallway. Ethan hesitated, but something inside urged him to follow. He had no choice anyway. He had nothing left but questions, and he needed answers, no matter how dangerous it might be to seek them. They walked through the corridors of the ship, and Ethan couldn't help but marvel at its size. The ship was like a living organism, dark, vast, and ever-changing. The walls seemed to pulse with a strange, alien energy. It was nothing like the human ships he had been on, with their cold, mechanical structure. The Xylarans had no need for the rigid designs that humans favored. Their ships, like their bodies, were fluid and organic, able to grow and adapt to any environment. Ethan could feel the power of it all, a sense of dominance that hung in the air. It was like walking inside the body of a living, breathing creature. Eventually, they reached a large chamber, its walls lined with strange, glowing symbols. It was a command center of some kind, filled with Xylaran officers who moved with a grace and precision that only military training could produce. The room went silent the moment Zalaria entered. All eyes turned to her, and there was a clear sense of respect, perhaps fear, in their gazes. Ethan felt out of place, like a child in the midst of a council of kings. "Leave us," Zalaria commanded. Her voice was sharp, and the officers immediately complied, exiting the room with quick, efficient movements. Soon, Ethan was alone with the Queen once again. "Sit," she ordered, pointing to a chair in front of a large desk. Ethan obeyed without thinking, sitting stiffly as he waited for her to speak. "I did not spare you out of mercy," Zalaria said, her voice low but clear. "I spared you because you have something that I need." Ethan frowned, confused. "What could a human soldier like me have that you need?" Zalaria's glowing eyes seemed to pierce through him. She took a step closer, and for the first time, Ethan felt a hint of the danger that lay beneath her calm exterior. "You are the key to something far greater than this war," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "Something I have been trying to uncover for a long time, the truth." Ethan stared at her, trying to make sense of her words. "The truth? What truth? What are you talking about?" Zalaria hesitated for a moment, as if weighing whether or not to reveal what was in her mind. Then, with a soft sigh, she began to explain. "For centuries, my people have been at war with other species. But what you don't understand, human, is that we are not the true enemy." She paused, letting her words sink in. Ethan was on edge, his mind racing. "There is a higher power in this galaxy. An ancient force that has manipulated the course of history for longer than any of us can remember. A group that has shaped the destinies of entire civilizations. And your people, the humans, have been a part of this for longer than you know." Ethan blinked, his heart pounding. "What do you mean, my people? We've been part of some conspiracy." "Yes," Zalaria replied simply, her voice tinged with a cold bitterness. "Your leaders have been working with them. All this time they have made deals, secret alliances, to ensure that humanity survives at the cost of others. They have sacrificed entire races to maintain their position in the galaxy." Ethan couldn't believe it. His mind was spinning. His government, his people, had made deals with the very forces that Zalaria was fighting. How could that be true? It didn't make sense. And yet, as he looked into the Queen's eyes, he saw something in them, a pain, a weariness, that told him she wasn't lying. "This war is not what it seems," Zalaria continued. "The Xylarans are not the true enemy. We are pawns in a game, and your species has been a part of it from the very beginning." Ethan felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. All his life, he had believed in the cause he fought for. He believed in humanity's need to protect itself. But now, standing here in the presence of the Queen, all of that felt like a lie. His entire purpose had been shaped by the hidden truths of the galaxy, by a game played by forces beyond his comprehension. "And that is why I spared you," Zalaria said softly. "You are the key. You have access to information that can expose the truth. You and the humans like you are the only ones who can stop this." Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. He had no idea what to do with this information. What could he do with it? He was a soldier, not a politician or a leader. He was just a man, a pawn in the same game. But now the pieces were shifting. He wasn't just fighting for humanity anymore. He was fighting for something bigger than himself, something that could change the galaxy. "You may hate me," Zalaria said, her voice softer now, "but I am not your enemy." The ones who control everything, the ones who have shaped your history, they are the true enemy. Ethan didn't know what to say. His head was spinning. Everything he thought he knew about the war, about his people, was suddenly in question. And at the center of it all was the queen who had spared his life, the alien who had shown him a truth that shattered everything. He looked at her, unsure of what to think, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. And Ethan had no idea where it would end. Ethan's mind was a storm of confusion and doubt. Zalaria's words echoed in his thoughts like a never-ending drumbeat. The truth she had revealed to him was so vast, so unimaginable, that he couldn't quite grasp it. His entire life, everything he had fought for, now seemed like a lie. How could his people, his own leaders, have made deals with the very enemies that threatened their survival? How could they have betrayed the galaxy in such a way? For days, he wandered the ship in silence, trying to make sense of what Zalaria had told him. He was still a prisoner, but his mind was no longer focused on escape. He didn't know what he was supposed to do with the information she had given him. The war he had fought in, the cause he had dedicated his life to, was not what he thought it was. Was he supposed to expose the truth? If he did, what would happen to humanity? To Zalaria? To the galaxy itself? Everywhere he looked, there was something alien about the ship. Its living walls, the strange hum of its engines, the glowing symbols etched into every surface. It was like being inside a creature, not a machine. It was a constant reminder that he was far from home, far from everything he knew. He was alone in the heart of an alien empire, and the queen who had spared his life was the only one who could answer the questions he had. But despite all the questions, there was still something unsettling about the queen. Ethan couldn't forget the way her eyes had glowed when she spoke of the truth. There was a certain darkness there, a sense of pain and loss that made her words feel all the more real. Zalaria was not just a conqueror. She was a queen who had been deceived, manipulated by forces greater than herself. In some ways, Ethan found himself feeling a strange kind of sympathy for her, despite everything. One day, Zalaria summoned him again. This time there was no cold command, no harsh words. She simply asked him to follow her as though she already knew he would. He did, without hesitation. The ship was quiet now, the hum of the engines softer than before. They moved through the corridors in silence, the walls around them seeming to pulse with a life of their own. When they arrived at her chambers, Ethan felt a mix of dread and curiosity. He had seen this part of the ship before, but he had never been allowed inside. The chamber was vast and strangely beautiful, lit by soft, glowing orbs that floated in the air. The walls were adorned with strange alien art, depicting scenes of battles and victories. It was a room fit for a queen, and Zalaria moved through it with an air of command, as if this was where she truly belonged. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, still unsure of what was happening. Was this another interrogation? Another test? Or was it something else entirely? "I know you are confused, Ethan," Zalaria said, her voice calm and steady. "The truth I have given you is not easy to understand. It's not something that can be accepted in a single moment. But you must understand this. Everything I have told you is true, and it is a truth that could change everything." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure he fully understood. The weight of the words she had spoken, the things she had revealed, felt like a burden he wasn't sure he could carry. "You said that humanity's leaders made deals with the enemies," he began slowly. "With the ones who have been manipulating the galaxy. But why? Why would they betray us? Why would they do that to their own people?" Zalaria sighed, her glowing eyes softening. "Because they believed it was the only way to survive. In the beginning, humanity was on the brink of destruction. The alien powers of the galaxy had banded together against you. But when your people were at their weakest, they were offered a chance. A chance to survive, to thrive in exchange for cooperation. It was a small price to pay, they thought. A few concessions. A few deals with the devil, so to speak. But those deals came at a cost that none of you understood." Ethan's heart sank as he listened to her words. It made a twisted kind of sense. He had always wondered why humanity had fought so fiercely against certain species, while at the same time forming uneasy alliances with others. It was all part of the plan, an intricate web of lies and manipulation. But the realization that his own leaders had been part of that plan, that they had knowingly sacrificed the galaxy to ensure humanity's survival, was a bitter pill to swallow. "Why are you telling me all of this?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" Zalaria's gaze was steady, almost searching. I want you to understand, Ethan. I want you to see the truth. The people you have been fighting for, they are not the heroes you think they are. And the enemy you have been taught to hate, the Xylarans, are not the true villains. There is a bigger force at play, a force that has manipulated everything, and if we don't expose it, if we don't stop it, everything will fall apart. Ethan leaned forward, his mind racing. How can I expose this? How can I stop something so powerful? Zalaria stood, her form tall and imposing as she looked down at him. That is why I spared your life. You are not like the others. You have seen the truth. You can be the one to speak out, to tell the galaxy what is really happening. But first, you must see it for yourself. You must understand what is at stake. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had always believed that fighting the Xylarans was the right thing to do, that humanity was in the right. But now, everything he had known was falling apart. If what Zalaria was saying was true, then humanity had been a part of something far darker than he could have ever imagined. He had been fighting for the wrong side. But why me? He asked, still not fully understanding. Why not one of your own people? Why not someone who knows the truth already? Zalaria paused for a moment, as if considering her answer carefully. Because you, Ethan, have something that we cannot touch. You have the power of humanity's will. You have the ability to unite the galaxy, to bring together the factions that have been divided for so long. If you can see beyond the lies, if you can recognize the truth, then you can be the one to change everything. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air. Ethan could feel the enormity of what she was saying. He had been caught in the middle of a war he didn't understand, fighting for a cause that might have been built on lies. The truth was so much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Ethan sat in silence, trying to process everything. The Queen's words were like a weight pressing down on him. He wasn't sure what to do, but one thing was clear. His life would never be the same. He had a choice to make, a choice that could change the fate of the entire galaxy. I don't know if I can do this, he said quietly. I don't know if I can expose the truth. What if I'm wrong? What if I make things worse? Zalaria looked at him with a piercing gaze, her expression softening for a moment. You won't be alone, Ethan. You will have me. And you will have others who want the same thing, to break free from the manipulation. Together we can do this. But you must choose. The truth is yours to reveal. The future of the galaxy rests in your hands. Ethan looked at her, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision before him. He had been a soldier all his life, trained to fight, to kill, to protect. But now he was being asked to do something far more difficult. He was being asked to fight for the truth, to expose the lies that had shaped his life. He didn't know if he was ready, but he knew one thing for sure. His journey was only just beginning. Ethan sat in the Queen's chamber, his mind still racing. The words Zalaria had spoken to him weighed heavily on his chest, making it hard to breathe. He had always believed in the cause he fought for, always trusted that humanity was on the side of right. But now he was left with the terrifying reality that everything he had known might be a lie. Zalaria had spoken of a hidden truth, a conspiracy that stretched across the galaxy. The Xylarans were not the true enemy. His people, humanity, had been a part of the galaxy's darker dealings. The truth felt too big to grasp, like trying to hold water in his hands. But somehow he had to hold on to it. Somehow he had to decide what to do next. Your mind is heavy with doubt, I can see it, Zalaria said, her voice gentle but firm. She stood by the large window of her chamber, gazing out at the stars beyond the ship. Her silhouette looked almost like a shadow, the darkness of space contrasting with the soft glow of her form. But doubt is a weapon, Ethan. It can either break you or strengthen you. Ethan looked at her, confused. She wasn't like the monsters he had imagined when he first heard of the Xylarans. She wasn't a mindless conqueror. She was a queen, yes, but she was also someone trapped in a struggle larger than herself, larger than any of them. I don't know what to believe anymore, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. I've always been told who the enemy was. I've been fighting for humanity, for what I thought was right. But now I don't know who the real enemy is. Zalaria turned from the window and looked at him with those glowing eyes. That's the problem, isn't it? You've been fighting for a cause, but you haven't understood the full picture. Humanity's leaders struck deals with the forces that you now think are your enemies. You've been manipulated for far too long. Ethan's heart sank. He had always believed that the war was about survival. That humanity had to fight, not just for their own future, but for the future of the entire galaxy. But now Zalaria was saying that all that he had been taught, all the reasons for the battles he fought, were based on lies. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, his voice shaky. "Why do you want me to know? You could just kill me and be done with it. You could make me disappear and no one would know. No one would question anything." Zalaria shook her head, her expression a mixture of sadness and resolve. "Because I see something in you, Ethan. I see a potential that you may not even realize yourself. You are a part of humanity, yes, but you also have a chance to change everything. I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight for the truth." Ethan didn't know what to say. He was a soldier. His entire life had been built around following orders, completing missions, and protecting his people. But this was something different. He wasn't sure if he could do it. The truth was dangerous, and exposing it could cost him everything. His life, his people, even his soul. But as he looked at Zalaria, something shifted inside him. She wasn't the enemy he had been taught to hate. She was a ruler caught in a war she didn't choose, fighting against forces even she couldn't control. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one being used. "You want me to expose the truth?" he asked slowly. "How? Where do I even begin?" Zalaria stepped closer, her voice softer now. "I've given you the key, Ethan, the evidence of what your people have done. The proof is in the data I gave you, the information your leaders tried to hide. You must go to Earth, to the heart of your government. You must show them the truth, and you must make them listen." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of returning to Earth, the place he had fought to protect, terrified him. What if they didn't believe him? What if they dismissed him as a traitor just like they had dismissed others before him? He was just one soldier, one voice. Against the power of the government, against the machinery of war, what difference could he make? "You think they'll listen?" he asked, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "They won't believe me. They'll say I've been brainwashed by you. They'll say I'm a puppet, a tool. I'm just one man. What can I do?" Zalaria met his gaze with a sharp intensity, her voice firm. "You are not just one man, Ethan. You are the spark. You are the one who can ignite the flame. People listen to heroes, and you can be that hero. If you find the courage to act, to speak the truth, others will follow." For a moment, Ethan thought about her words. Could he really do this? Could he be the one to expose the truth, to risk everything for the galaxy, for the future of his people? He wasn't sure. He had never been the kind of person to take risks. He had always followed orders, always done what he was told. But this was different. This wasn't a mission. This was a choice. And for the first time in his life, he had to make it alone. "Where do I go?" he asked, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. "How do I start?" Zalaria gave a small nod. "You will have help. There are others who want to see the truth revealed. You will not be alone, but you must act quickly. Time is running out." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had no idea how this would all play out. He didn't know if he was making the right choice or if he was walking into a trap. But one thing was clear: Zalaria was not his enemy. The real enemy was the one hiding in the shadows, pulling the strings, manipulating everyone. And it was time for the galaxy to wake up and see it. "I'll do it," he said, the words coming out more confidently than he felt. "I'll go back to Earth. I'll expose the truth. I'll make them listen." Zalaria smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "You are braver than you know, Ethan, but remember, there is no going back. Once the truth is exposed, there will be no way to undo the damage. You will change everything. And nothing will ever be the same." Ethan nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had agreed to do. He had no choice now. His life was no longer just his own. It was tied to something much bigger, something that would change the fate of the galaxy. He turned and walked toward the door, but before he left, he paused. Zalaria was standing by the window again, looking out at the stars. "Will you be there?" he asked, his voice quiet. She turned to face him, her eyes glowing softly. "I will always be here, Ethan. But this is your fight now." With that, Ethan stepped out of the Queen's chamber and into the unknown. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure: the galaxy was about to change. And he was the one who was going to make it happen. Ethan's feet felt heavy as he walked through the long, dark corridors of Zalaria's ship. His mind was clouded with doubt, but also determination. There was no turning back now. The Queen had given him everything he needed: the proof, the knowledge, the access to the truth. But now it was up to him to make the galaxy believe it. Zalaria was right. Once he exposed the truth, everything would change. There would be no going back. The ship was alive with activity as he made his way toward the transport bay. He had been given a small ship, an escape pod of sorts, to get him back to Earth. It wasn't much, but it was all he needed. The journey would be long and dangerous, but that was nothing compared to the risks he had already taken. He had no illusions that things would be easy. If humanity was to wake up to the truth, it would take everything he had, and more. As Ethan climbed into the pod, he glanced back at the massive ship. Zalaria's warship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It pulsed with energy, its organic form stretching into the vast expanse of space. It was a living thing, just like her people, full of power and purpose. But now, Ethan was leaving it behind. He was going back to a world that seemed light years away, a world that still believed in the lies that had been fed to them for centuries. The pod's engines roared to life as he engaged the controls, and soon he was drifting through space, the massive warship shrinking into the distance. His heart beat faster with each passing second. It wasn't fear that made him anxious. It was the weight of what he was carrying. The truth, the whole truth. And if he failed, if the galaxy didn't believe him, everything would be lost. His people would remain blind to the darkness that had been manipulating them. The war would continue, and innocent lives would keep being destroyed. Days passed in the quiet of the pod, with only the hum of the engines to keep him company. The journey was lonely. Ethan spent most of it lost in his thoughts, replaying the conversations with Zalaria over and over again. She had been open with him, more so than he had expected from the queen of an enemy force. She had shown him a side of the war he never knew existed, a side that made him question everything. Humanity's leaders had made deals with the galaxy's enemies, sacrificing entire species in the process. And now it was up to him to expose that truth. His thoughts were interrupted by the blinking of the pod's sensors. Earth was in sight. The reality of what he was about to do hit him hard. He had no plan, no backup, no way of knowing how the government would react. What if they didn't believe him? What if they arrested him as a traitor? Worse, what if they shut him down before he could expose the truth? The weight of the situation pressed down on him, but there was nothing else to do now. He had to try. He had to make them see. As the pod descended into Earth's atmosphere, Ethan's hands shook as he prepared for landing. The pod's exterior heated as it entered the atmosphere, and the turbulence was fierce, but he kept his focus, gripping the controls tightly. He could see the ground below, a patchwork of cities, forests, and oceans. His home, the place he had sworn to protect. But now it seemed like a distant memory, a place he barely recognized. The pod touched down with a heavy thud, and Ethan immediately unbuckled himself. He didn't waste time. There was no room for hesitation. He grabbed the data device Zalaria had given him, the one containing all the proof of humanity's hidden dealings, and rushed out of the pod. The landing site was isolated, just outside a small city. He had no idea how much time he had before someone noticed the pod, so he wasted no time gathering his things. He needed to get to the nearest government facility, to the people who could make a difference. But getting there would be the hard part. He didn't have clearance. He didn't have protection. All he had was the truth and the hope that it would be enough. As Ethan made his way through the city, he felt like a ghost. The streets were busy, with people going about their everyday lives, unaware of the truth that was about to shake their world. It was strange to see everything so normal, so peaceful, when his mind was consumed by the knowledge of what was really going on. Every corner he turned, every face he passed, made him feel more and more like an outsider. A man who knew too much, a man who could never go back to his old life. It took hours to reach the government building. By then, night had fallen and the streets were quieter. Ethan took a deep breath and walked toward the entrance. Security was tight, but he had expected that. His military clearance should have been enough to get him in, but that was before everything changed. Now he was a fugitive, a potential traitor. The guards looked at him suspiciously as he approached. "I need to speak with someone in charge," Ethan said, his voice steady. "It's urgent. It's about the war, about the truth." The guards exchanged glances, then motioned for him to follow. They led him through the halls, down corridors he hadn't walked in years. He had been part of the military for so long that these halls felt like a second home. But now they felt foreign. The people he once trusted, the leaders he once followed, were part of the lie. He had to find someone who would listen to him, someone who would take the information he had and do something with it. They reached an office, and the guards knocked before opening the door. Inside, a familiar figure sat at a desk, looking over reports. General Mitchell, Ethan's commanding officer, the man who had given him orders for years. He looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw Ethan. "What are you doing here?" the general asked, his tone suspicious. "You shouldn't be here, you're a deserter now." "I'm not here for that," Ethan said, his voice tense. "I'm here to expose the truth. Everything we've been told about this war, it's a lie. We've been manipulated by forces beyond our control." General Mitchell stood up, his expression hardening. "What are you talking about?" Ethan pulled out the data device Zalaria had given him and placed it on the desk. "This contains everything, the deals, the lies. The real enemy, you need to look at it. You need to understand what's really happening." For a moment, the general didn't move. He stared at the device, his eyes flicking between it and Ethan. Finally, he reached for it, his hands trembling. He activated it and the screen came to life. The data was overwhelming, information about secret alliances, hidden agreements, and betrayals that went all the way to the top. As the general watched, his face grew pale, his eyes widened in disbelief. "No," he muttered. "This can't be." "It's true," Ethan said. "Everything you've been told about our enemies, everything we've been fighting for, it's all part of a bigger plan, a plan that doesn't include us." The general looked at him, his gaze hardening. "What do you want me to do with this?" "Expose it," Ethan said. "Tell the people, tell the galaxy, we have to stop this before it's too late." There was a long silence. Ethan could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He didn't know if the general would believe him, if he would act on the information. But he had done everything he could. The truth was out there now. It was no longer in his hands. "You've put everything at risk," the general said quietly. "I know," Ethan replied, "but sometimes the truth is the only thing worth fighting for." With that, Ethan turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the life he had known. The journey wasn't over, but for the first time he felt like he was on the right path. The truth was out, and now it was up to the galaxy to decide what to do with it.